Well now, are you settled? Welcome back to Celticism, your place for ghost stories told in the dark. If these stories bring you rest, tap like, subscribe, and share with a friend who might like to listen in the dark. And in the morning, when you wake, leave a comment and tell me how you slept. Every night, you'll find the stories waiting here. Let this be your resting place. And there's a trick to letting go. You don't need to force your eyes closed. Instead, soften them. Let the shadows blur and dance at the edges. And when you do, your body will follow. Your shoulders will ease. Your breath will fall into rhythm. And sleep will come quietly. So now, let's begin. And the first story of the night is called The Lover's Picnic. The oars cut through the still water, Loch Corrib stretched wide, flat as glass, the last light of day fading behind the far hills. The little fishing boat creaked and swayed, but otherwise the night was quiet. No sound but the dip of the oar, the drip as Diarmaid Collins pulled, and the faint rustle of water against wood. Peggy Reynolds sat near the bow, arms folded against the chill, wondering what sort of foolishness he had dragged her into. A boat ride at this hour. That had been better in a warm kitchen with the fire lit. But then Diarmaid smiled, setting the oars aside. From beneath the seat, he pulled a basket. Her irritation melted. He laid out flowers, rough, wild ones gathered from the hedgerow but tied neat with twine. Then food, bread baked earlier that day, cheese wrapped in cloth, sliced ham, even a jar of jam. And finally, from the bottom, a bottle of whiskey. For us, he said, 1 year. Peggy's lips parted. She looked from the spread to him, and her chest softened. You're daft, she murmured, but she was smiling. He poured a measure into 2 chipped enamel mugs. They clinked them together, the sound small in the vast silence of the lake. The whiskey burned their throats, set their cheeks warm. Soon they were feeding each other pieces of bread, fumbling and laughing at the clumsy mess of it. She smeared jam across his chin and kissed it off, their laughter carrying thin and light across the still air. The stars came out one by one. The mist thickened across the surface, a silver-white veil curling low. Peggy tilted her head back and sighed. It was beautiful, magical, even. Diarmaid, always one for mischief, stuck a fork between his teeth, puffing as though it were a pipe. He squinted, hunching his shoulders, his voice low and cracked. Best not go out after dark, lad, he croaked. Best not stir what sleeps in the tide. Peggy laughed so hard the boat rocked. Who's that meant to be? Padre Costello, he said, pulling the fork free. The old keeper. You should have heard him today wagging his finger, said the lake changes at night, that things stir in the depths when the stars come out. Sure, he's as mad as a brush, Peggy said. Mad as 10 brushes, Diarmaid grinned, pouring more whiskey. They drank too much, the world blurred soft around the edges. Her heart felt light. They kissed again, longer this time, and the boat rocked gently beneath them. Then, with that grin she both loved and dreaded, Diarmaid pulled back. Right, let's swim. Before she could scold, he had stripped his shirt and trousers, and with a holler he leapt. The splash rang out. water spraying high, ripples racing out. She gasped, clutching the basket. "You're cracked," she called after him, half laughing, half horrified. The ripples spread, and then, stilled, the mist thickened, swallowing the last ring of movement. The lake lay smooth once more. Peggy frowned. "Dermot?" No answer. The boat rocked once gently. She leaned forward. The surface gave nothing back. "Dermot, come on now, enough." Silence. And then a knock. A hollow thud beneath the hull. The whole boat shuddered. Peggy shrieked, clutching the seat. She looked down into the dark water and saw nothing but mist and shadow. It went still. Her breath came shallow, heart hammering. "Dermot!" From the mist, 50 feet away, a shape broke the surface. Her breath caught. His face pale in the starlight, hair plastered flat, mouth slack. His whole body upright in the water, shoulders submerged, but too still. "You idiot!" she snapped, relief and anger mixing. "You nearly gave me a—" He didn't move. He didn't answer. Instead, he drifted, upright, slowly, closer, as though pulled forward by a cord, gliding without arms or legs breaking the surface. Peggy pressed her back against the bench, shaking her head. "Stop it, you're scaring me." He came closer. His eyes stared wide, unblinking. The mist curled around him. His mouth hung open as though frozen in a scream. She stumbled. Something struck the hull from beneath, hard enough to rattle the boards, and then thump. His head, only his head, spat up onto the planks, wet, heavy, eyes wide, lips blue. Peggy screamed, shrill and tearing. A groan rose beneath the water. Deep, cavernous, like the belly of the lake itself had found a voice. It whistled, low, mournful, almost like a whale's call. The sound sank into her bones, hollowed her out. The boat jolted again. An oar slipped loose. She lunged, too slow. It drifted away, carried into the mist. The second oar followed, nudged as if by an unseen hand. Both slid out of reach, vanishing into the fog. Her breaths came ragged, sobs caught in her throat. The severed head stared at her, mouth slack. The surface broke again. A hump, slick and dark, hair glistening like an otter's back, massive. It rose just long enough to be seen, then slipped beneath with hardly a splash. Silence followed, so heavy it pressed on her shoulders. Another knock from beneath. The boat groaned and tilted. Peggy froze, gripping the bench, unable to scream again. The mist rolled thicker, erasing the stars, erasing the world, and then nothing. Days later, Padre Costello stood on the bluff above the lake. The wind tugged at his coat. He stared down at the dark waters, silent. Another man came beside him, arms crossed. "They never came back, did they, the young couple?" Padre didn't answer. The man gave a dry laugh. "You'll be telling me it was one of your waterhounds, one of them dour coo, big enough to turn a boat, slick as an otter, calls through the tide, isn't that what they say?" Pather's jaw clenched, his eyes stay fixed on the lake. I never said a word. The mist curled low across the surface. The lake gave no answer. Let the water rest still. Breathe with it. Let your chest rise and fall. Let your eyes soften, but don't close them fully. If you find them closing on you, just open them again slightly and let the quiet take you deeper into rest, because another story waits just ahead. And this tale is called The Autumn Path. The path was narrow, lined with hedges so thick the sky was cut to ribbons. Leaves lay scattered, but their colours were off, sickly shades, ash grey, green like mould, yellow faded to white. From somewhere close came the thin trickle of water. Darren turned. The banshee stood there, her hair hung long, black as bog water. Her face was pale, hollowed by grief. Her eyes stared through him, not with anger, but with pity too heavy to bear. Before he could move, a wooden stake drove through his back, bursting from his chest. He felt the hollow, the tearing, the air gone from his lungs, and then he woke, chest heaving, damp with sweat. Beside him, Aoife slept soundly, turned on her side. At the foot of the bed, his dog, Bandit, stood. The big lad padded closer, pressed his chin to Darren's arm and gave a soft whine. Darren let his hand rest heavy on the warm head. "You're a good lad," he whispered, though his breath still came fast. He lay awake long into the dark, listening to the steady pulse of his heart. The days were steady. Darren worked with his hands, timber, stone, whatever the season demanded. His palms were rough, nails lined with grit. Evenings were for tea, for firelight, for Aoife's humming. She moved about the kitchen, sleeves rolled back, singing half-tunes with no words. Bandit lay stretched by the hearth, eyes half shut, tail thudding now and again. Every so often, Aoife tried it with him. She knelt, patted her knee. "Here, boy." The dog's ear twitched. He didn't stir. Another time she tossed him a scrap from the table. He glanced, sniffed, and laid his head back down. "Strange one," she said with a smile. Darren only shrugged, scratching the thick fur on Bandit's neck. "Ah, he's grand." It wasn't coldness, it wasn't fear. The dog simply gave her nothing. But with Darren, he was always there, at the door when he came in, by his side when he shaved in the morning, at his heel when he walked the lane. "You've spoiled him," Aoife teased once. Darren only grinned. "Ah, maybe I have." Nights deepened early that season. Sometimes Darren saw his own reflection in the glass of the window, and for a blink thought another face was behind his shoulder, pale, watching. He'd turn and find only Aoife brushing her hair or the dog shifting on the mat. He told himself he was tired and nothing more. One evening, his shift ended early. The men were sent home with dusk only just falling, and Darren cut across the back lane where the hedges grew thick and the ground dipped into hollows. And that's when he heard it. A whimper, not sharp or wounded, just soft and drawn out, almost ghostly. It was Bandit's voice. Darren froze. The hairs on his arms prickled. The dog should have been at home, stretched by the fire. "Boy," he called into the hedges. Nothing answered but the soft stir of wind. Still, the sound pulled at him. He followed down the dip, boots squelching in wet soil. He saw flecks dark against the leaves. They gleamed in the half-light. Not water or shadow. Blood. The trail led into a thorny hollow, and there he found him. Bandit lay still, his throat matted dark. Through his ribs jutted a wooden stake, driven, cruel and clean. Darren dropped to his knees, his hands pressed useless against the fur. "Oh no, 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 no." The sound came raw from his throat. His chest was hollow, exactly as in his dream. When he could breathe again, he saw the ground. There were prints pressed into the soil, bare and narrow, the toes long, the nails scoring the mud into half moons. They led from the hollow up the slope, all the way to his own gate. His stomach turned to ice. The front door was closed but not latched. Darren eased it open a crack, and Aoife stood at the sink. The tap ran steady and thin, the same trickle he'd heard in his dream. Her hands were red, her cheeks smeared dark, and she was smiling, not wild, not crazed, a quiet, pleased smile as though savoring a secret. She rubbed the blood slow across her arms, over her face. She closed her eyes, breathing in as if the scent were a perfume. And that's when Darren saw it. Under her skin, spines rippled, lifting in waves along her arms, up her neck, across her jaw, tiny points shifting like quills. Her eyelids fluttered open. A second lid slid sideways across her eye and back again, smooth, quick, almost unseen. She turned back to the sink. The water ran red, then pink, then clear. Her hands moved in small, neat circles, wiping the basin clean. The trickle stopped. She kept smiling, the sort of smile that belongs to someone already rehearsing their story, the tale of how a dog slipped out, how she called, and how it never came back. A smile steady enough to greet Darren at 6 o'clock, with every careful word waiting on her tongue. The story ends there, at the sink, with silence in the house. Let your breath slow. Let your body settle deeper into the quiet. And if sleep hasn't found you yet, don't worry. Another story waits just ahead. The next tale is called Late Night Librarian. There was once a library in Dublin built of stone and oak, quiet as a tomb. By day, the long windows lit the rows of shelves in a pale light. By night, the lamps hissed and gave off a dull glow, leaving shadows in the high corners. It was the kind of place where you could hear a pin drop. The scrape of a chair or the cough of a reader seemed far too loud. Even the sound of a page turning carried through the hush. Dominic Molloy was the librarian there, a steady man. He was in his 50s with tired eyes and thinning hair. He loved silence. He loved the order. Each book had its place, and Dominic kept them in a line as if they were soldiers. He didn't drink much, he didn't gamble, he had no family. His sins, if he had them, were small and private. That winter, Dominic noticed a new face in the reading room, a pale young man in a dark coat. He came in late each afternoon and sat in the far corner, away from the light. He carried with him a strange volume, a leather-bound book, brown and cracked with age. There was no title on the cover. Dominic assumed it was the man's own. He had never seen it in the library before. It looked older than the shelves themselves. The first evening, Dominic saw him leaf through the first pages. The next evening, the man sat at the table, reading on, quiet and still. The library grew used to his presence. By the end of the week, Dominic noticed something odd. The man never turned a page. Hours went by, the lamps dimmed, other readers left, chairs scraped. The pale young man sat frozen, staring down, lips slightly parted. His hands rested on the edge of the parchment, as if ready to turn it, but he never did. At first, Dominic thought nothing of it. Some readers linger, some study each line, but when he went to snuff the lamps at closing, he paused by the corner table. The young man had his mouth slack, his eyes fixed, and from his lips hung a thin string of drool. It ran down his chin, caught in the lamp glow, and glistened. Dominic felt his stomach turn. He stepped closer. Sir, he said softly, we're closing for the night. The man didn't answer. Dominic touched his shoulder. The young man slowly, stiffly rose to his feet, his face blank, his gaze far away. He didn't speak or blink. Dominic, uneasy, guided him to the door. The street outside was dark, wet with mist. The man walked out, silent as a ghost. With each step, Dominic swore he saw a faint flare beneath them, as though the ground itself was singeing under his tread. The librarian froze, staring, his breath caught. But the man walked into the fog, and soon he was gone. Dominic locked the door and returned to the empty room. The silence pressed heavy on him. He gathered the stray books, stacked the chairs. But when he reached the corner table, he stopped. The leather-bound book lay there, waiting. Its cover was cracked, bare, no title, no mark. The air around it felt colder. Dominic hesitated. He should leave it, but it was his duty to put all books away. Slowly he reached out and opened it. The page the man was reading at the time was blank, apart from one small detail. Then, before Dominic's eyes, writing began to spread across the page. Not ink, not quill, the words grew as though rising from beneath the skin of the page, dark red, raw as blood. His throat tightened. The line read, "No one lives without sin, least of all you, Dominic Molloy." Dominic staggered back, but he could not stop reading. His eyes held fast to the page. Then the book wrote on. "Let me tell you of your fate," it said. The lamp flickered. The words crawled further down. Dominic's lips parted. His face slackened. A line of drool spilled from his mouth. He bent closer. His eyes widened. His mind emptied, pulled into the parchment. Line after line appeared, and still he read. The silence deepened, the air grew heavy, and when the lamps guttered out, Dominic Molloy sat frozen, as blank as the broken man before him. The next morning, the doors of the library stood wide open. The tables were empty, the shelves still, and on the corner desk lay the leather-bound book. It sat open, waiting, that same blank page, and at the bottom of it, that small detail, page number 666. Let the story drift. The last images fading like smoke. Slow your breath, let your chest rise and fall in a steady rhythm. Whatever page the mind opens, let it turn away now. We'll leave the library behind and step gently into the next tale. And this tale is called The Weeping Child. There was once a village in Kerry at the edge of a dark bay. The land there rose into steep hills, and on the tallest of them stood the ruin of a castle. The villagers said it was cursed, others laughed and called it just another ruin. But it had a presence. By day it loomed above the cottages like broken teeth, and by night it turned black as pitch, and the crows that circled it seemed to vanish inside. At the foot of the hill lived two sisters in a small white cottage with a turf fire. The elder was Nell, 20 years old, steady, practical, and firm. The younger was Clodagh, 16, quiet and dreamy. She would often sit at the window with a book on her lap, eyes wandering up to the castle. For years she had stared at those stones in curiosity. She told Nell it felt like the place was watching back, and Nell scolded her for nonsense. But lately, Clodagh had been seeing something she couldn't explain. Some nights, when she sat up reading, A light would appear in one of the broken upper windows of the castle. A faint glow, like candlelight. It stayed for minutes at a time, then faded. Nell said it must be the moon catching the glass, but Clodagh knew better. She stared at it with wide eyes, the flicker burning in her mind even after it was gone. One stormy night, as rain lashed the thatch and thunder shook the hills, Clodagh rose from her bed. Her eyes were closed. She moved as if pulled by a string. She lifted a candle from the hearth. Barefoot, she stepped out into the fields. The rain poured heavy. The wind bent the grasses flat. But the flame didn't flicker, not once, as if some dark hand cupped it close, guarding it against the storm. She walked on, white nitrous clinging to her skin, hair plastered to her face. Her bare feet sank in mud, yet she did not falter. She was sleepwalking, and yet not. The candle guided her, the hill drew her, and then she heard the baby's cry. Faint at first, carried thinly on the wind, but sharp enough to cut through the storm. Clodagh's head tilted, her lips parted. Even in her dreamlike state, something inside her stirred, something maternal, instinctive. The sound pulled at her heart. It urged her forward, stronger than the storm itself. She climbed the slope, the ruin looming closer with each step. She crossed the broken gate and entered the castle. Inside, the air was heavy and damp. The stone sweated, moss clung to the cracks. Puddles spread across the floor. Clodagh stepped carefully, the candle steady in her hand, and then the voice came, a deep voice, low as thunder, rolling from the dark. It spoke in Irish, heavy and slow. Darren, come here. The candle flared bright, as if answering. Clodagh turned toward the glow. Again, the voice. Níos cungrí. Closer. The flame rose higher. She followed. Every time she chose the right path, the flame leapt tall, and when she hesitated, it dimmed. Step by step, it guided her through the ruin, and with each turn, the baby's cry rang sharper, clearer, echoing off the stone. It tugged at her chest, at her bones, drawing her deeper, deeper still. The voice coaxed, the candle flared. The child's cry pierced her like a hook, and she obeyed. Back in the cottage, Nell woke with a start. The bed beside her was empty. She searched the kitchen, the loft, the yard, but nothing. Her heart pounded. She lit a lamp and ran into the storm. She searched the fields, calling Clodagh's name. Her voice tore against the rain, no answer. Then her eyes lifted to the hill. The ruins stood black against the sky, but for a moment, just a flicker, she thought she saw a light in one of its windows. Her blood turned cold. Clodagh had always stared at that place, always wondered. Nell knew where she had gone. She gathered her skirts and ran. Clodagh had already reached the heart of the ruin. Her candle flared high in a vaulted chamber. The cries of the child filled the space, sharp and desperate echoing in her skull. The voice spoke once more. Vanum, stay with me. And then came the laugh, deep, cruel, echoing from the stones. Nell burst into the ruin, her lamp swinging. She ran through the doors, shouting her sister's name. No baby cried, no voice whispered. The halls were silent but for her breath. She found Clodagh at last in the vaulted chamber. Her sister lay on the stone, nitrous clinging, skin white as chalk. Her neck bore 2 neat punctures. There was no blood on the floor, none on her skin. It was as if every drop had been drawn inward and swallowed away. Nell dropped to her knees, shaking her. Clodagh, please wake up. There was no answer. Then, with a crash like thunder, the castle's front doors slammed shut. Iron bolts fell into place. Nell's lamp flickered, and then she heard it, not in the hall or the ruin, but in her head. The cry of a baby, sharp, endless, filling her skull until her teeth ached and her eyes blurred with terror. Some in the village would later whisper what Nell found that night. A sister drained, her drained, neat marks on their necks. In hushed tones they gave it a name. The Avarthach, the blood drinker of Irish legend, said to walk again when buried, said to drain not only the body but the spirit too. Few spoke of it aloud. Fewer still dared climb that hill again. Let the ruin fade, let the storm roll away into silence. Your breath can steady, slow, easy. The candle has gone out and the doors are closed behind us. But there are other doors ahead and other stories waiting. Settle yourself a little deeper. Let your body soften, and we'll move quietly onto the next tale. And the next tale is called The Gift. Jim was a quiet lad with quick hands. He lived with his mother, Irene, in a small house at the edge of a Kerry village. He carved for a living spoons, pipes, little saints for mantelpieces, anything the neighbours asked for. His father had died years before. It was the two of them since then. They made do. They minded each other. For her birthday, Jim wanted to make something finer than he had ever made. He found a good length of pale wood and set to work. He shaved it thin, curved it, sanded it smooth with flour and cloth. He carved little knots and twists so it looked like it had grown that way. He drilled each piece and strung them on a cord of waxed thread, bead by bead, until it lay in a perfect loop on his work table. When he polished it, the grain took on a soft shine. On the morning of her birthday, he brought it in wrapped in brown paper. "Oh, what's all this?" Irene said, smiling already. "Go on, ma'am, open it." She peeled the paper, lifted the curve of wood in both hands, and her eyes filled. "Ah, Jim, it's beautiful. Look at this. Look at all the little turns on it. Lord help us, aren't you clever?" "Let me give you a hand," he said, and fastened it at the back of her neck. She stood by the window, turning her head one way and the other to catch the light. "I'll never take it off," she said. She kissed his cheek. "You're a good son." For a week the house felt light. She wore the necklet every day. When neighbours came in, she put a hand to it and said, "Jim made this, my Jim." He blushed and waved them off and brought more tea. And then small things began. At the table one evening, she stared at him too long and said, out of nowhere, "You've no head for figures, have you?" He blinked. "What's that now?" "You make a mess of any books you've touched." Her mouth tightened. "Like your father." Jim set down his cup. "I'll do my best with the orders, so." She frowned, as if waking. What am I saying? I'm sorry, love. Pay no heed to me. I'm just tired." She touched the necklet and smiled again. "Isn't it lovely?" The next day she was her old self. She sat by the hearth, darning socks, humming a tune Jim remembered from when he was small. When he brought in an armful of kindling, she stood to help, and he laughed and told her he had it. That evening it turned again. She stood over the pot and said in a flat voice, "You'll never amount to anything if you keep on like this." The spoon clinked the rim. He stared at her back. What did you say?" "Nothing," she said at once, bright and warm. "Did I say something? I was away in thought." She turned and smiled, and the smile was hers again. "You're a good lad. Will we have a bit of bread with the stew, do you think?" So it went, kindness and bite, warmth and cold. Some days it was no more than a tone. Some days the words had teeth. Jim tried to laugh it off. "You know, you're fierce changeable lately," he said lightly. "Changeable?" she said, puzzled. "Am I?" Then she reached across to pat his hand. "I'm only tired, that's all." He told himself the same, but the swings grew sharper. One afternoon, when he came in from the shed, she was standing by the window, looking out at nothing. "Tea, ma'am?" he said. "You were no help to me," she said without turning. He stopped in the doorway. "What's that you say?" "You were more trouble than you were worth." Her voice had a twist in it that was not hers. "If I had a sense, I'd have sent you to a cousin and kept my peace." He felt the words as if someone had struck him. "Ma'am," she blinked, and her voice loosened. "Jim, why are you looking at me like that?" "Well, you... Never mind," he said, and went to the kettle. That night she cried out in her sleep. He ran in and found her sitting up, hand at her throat. He held her shoulders and soothed her till she lay down again. In the morning she didn't remember. The next week it broke open. They were eating, a quiet meal, knives against plates, the clock ticking. He told her a small story from the road, how he had met old Mrs. Kelleher with her new hen, and how the hen had pecked his boot. He expected a laugh. Instead, she looked at him with a dead, level stare. "You think that's a story?" she said.
God help me, it bore the hair off a stone.
Jim set down his fork.
Ma'am, you hear me, I wasted my life on you, years and years, turning out a fool. You were a mistake from the day you opened your eyes.
It came so cleanly, so calmly, that it didn't sound like anger. It sounded like sentence. He swallowed.
Why are you saying that?
She lifted a hand, and the necklet flashed in the lamplight.
Because it's true, boy. You're nothing, a man with scraps of wood and nothing in his head. Do you hear me? Nothing.
He sat very still. He felt the old instinct to nod and say he'd do better to make peace, to be useful. The words didn't come. Then her face crumpled. She covered her mouth.
What did I just say, Jim? What did I just say?
She reached across the table with both hands.
Oh, love, I don't know what's wrong with me. I don't know what I just said. You're my heart, you know you are.
He let her take his hands. His eyes stung. It's all right, he said, though it wasn't. The days after were worse. The changes came quicker, like squalls. He never knew which voice would answer him. In the yard. Will you bring in the basket, ma'am?
You can carry your own weight for once.
What's that?
What? What? God above, must I say it twice? Bring it yourself.
Then a heartbeat later.
Oh, Jim, I'll get it. Sit down, your hands are sore, I know they are.
At the dresser.
Do you want your cap or the other one?
The cap, ma'am.
Don't you ma'am me, she hissed, eyes bright and wrong. Any man but you would have left and made a life, but you stayed, didn't you? For the easy here, for the woman to feed you.
He stepped back, and the breath would shake in him. Then she'd touch his cheek with trembling fingers and whisper,
Oh, I'm sorry, I don't know what I said. Help me, please, will you help me?
In the nights he lay awake and listened to the clock and the small breathing from her room and tried to sort the pieces. He thought of bringing Father O'Dwyer. He thought of taking the necklet from her when she slept. He pictured her walking and touching her throat and missing it, and he couldn't bear the look that would be on her face. He did nothing. One evening, the weather pressed low, the room felt close. He was oiling a hinge at the table. She stood at the sink, drying a cup, her back to him. Ma'am, he said softly, will you sit a minute? You're on your feet all day. She didn't turn.
You were a waste the day you were born.
His hand stopped. Please don't.
You were a weight, and you're still a weight.
She set the dry cup down as if setting down a stone.
You took and gave nothing back.
He stood. Stop it, ma'am, now. She turned then. Her face had a brightness in it that frightened him.
Who are you to tell me to stop?
She said the words quick and sharp.
Who are you at all? A boy I'd never wanted. A boy who should have been put out to a family with more to spare. I should have kept the best years for myself, you know.
He shook his head. Ma'am, this isn't you.
Isn't it?
She smiled in a way he had never seen.
Maybe this is the only me there ever was. Maybe all the rest was a good story to keep you quiet.
He stepped toward her. Ma'am, please. She reached without looking, and her hand came up with the knife from beside the loaf. It flashed under the lamp. Don't, he said. She laughed once, a small breath through her nose.
What would you do if I did?
Her voice slid into a hiss.
What would you do, boy?
He moved quick, caught her wrist. Ma'am, put it down.
Take your hands off me, she spat, fierce, eyes hot with a light that wasn't hers. They struggled. The chair skittered back. The oil bottle tipped and ran a dark shine across the wood. Her other hand clawed at him. He held her as if she might fly to pieces. They turned, bumped the table. The knife nicked his sleeve and bit the air. "Let it go," he said, teeth clenched. "Ma'am, for the love of God." "Nothing," she hissed. "You're nothing, nothing, nothing." The cord at her throat caught the edge of his cuff. In the pull and the turn there was a small sound, thread parting. The loop slipped. The carved beads struck the table and scattered across the floor, rolling under the press, bouncing against the skirting, ticking like seeds from a burst pod. Irene froze. Her eyes widened as if a fog had lifted. She looked at his hands and her wrists as if surprised to find them there. The knife fell and clattered and spun to a stop. She stepped back, and the backs of her knees found the settle. She slid onto it and pressed her palms to the wall behind her as if to steady the house itself. "Jim," she said, small as a child. He stood staring, chest heaving. The room seemed to have no air. She looked around the kitchen as if she had never seen it. Then she looked down at the little curls of wood on the floor, the beads, the thread like a dead worm on the boards. Her mouth trembled. What happened? You mean you don't remember?" She shook her head once, sharp, as if to shake water from her ear. "I was drying a cup, and then..." She covered her mouth with one hand. A thin sound came out of her. "Oh, Jim, I'm frightened. Where am I?" Tears spilled. "What did I do?" He didn't move at first. He was afraid to. He was afraid if he stepped wrong the whole room would crack. Then he crossed the space slowly, as you cross ice. He sat beside her. His hands shook as he put them around her shoulders. She was small in his arms, and she was his mother again. He knew it by the smell of sunlight and the flower in her hair, the old, old smell of home. It's all right," he said, though his throat hurt to say it. "It's all right now. You're here. I've got you." She leaned her head to his chest and sobbed like a girl, and he rocked her. When she shivered, he pulled the shawl from the peg and wrapped it around her, and kept one hand at the back of her head, the way she had done for him years before. "It's all right," he said again, quieter. "I have you." The knife lay on the flags, turned, harmless. The beads sat like little pale seeds in the oil and the dust. The lamp burned steady. Somewhere a dog barked twice and gave up. He held her until her breathing eased and the tightness went out of her hands. He kept his face turned so she wouldn't see the tears on it. He felt the shape of the room return, as if the house had been held by the throat and could now breathe. When she slept, he laid her down on the settle and drew the shawl up around her. He picked the beads from the floor one by one and put them in his pocket and didn't look at them. He blew out the lamp and stood a while in the quiet kitchen listening to the clock. His heart beat like a hammer, and then like a drum, and then like a bird that had come at last to rest. And in the field nearby stood a lone hawthorn tree with one limb cut from its flesh. And now let that tale fade like smoke in the night air. Breathe slow, let your eyes soften, not close, just soft, so the shadows blur at the edges. Your hands grow heavy, your body lighter, every muscle loosening. If these stories bring you rest,
Tap like, subscribe, share with a friend who listens in the dark. And in the morning, tell me in the comments how you slept. And come back tomorrow night and the night after, and let this be your resting place. Now sink deeper. The storm outside is swaying. Drift into the wind and the rain. Relax. Breathe. Good night.